12:05. I think we'll kick into it now. So welcome everyone to the IDP version 3 webinar. This is a webinar on what's new in IDP 3 and why we want everyone to move to this version of IDP 3 over the next few months. I've got with me in the room Dahlia Abrams, technical specialist from the AAF, and she'll be watching the chat and answering questions as we go, and also collecting questions for the Q&A session at the end. We've also got Vladimir, or Vlad, from the New Zealand Federation Tirakiri joining us to help with the presentation, and we've got some of his colleagues from universities in New Zealand who are also participating in this webinar. So welcome to you guys from over the ditch, and also welcome to all the Australian Federation IDP managers and operators at the webinar. So let's dive into it. So during this session, all the attendees will be muted. If you have any questions, use the chat thing. As I said, Dahlia will be monitoring the chat and capturing questions for later, and also possibly answering questions on the fly. If you want to send questions, just the chat place to go. There will be time at the end for a Q&A about the session. And we are recording this session, and we'll make the session and the slides available to everybody who registered for the webinar after the webinar is completed. So, what are we going to cover today? 5 main points that we'd like to talk to. Firstly, what's new in Shibboleth IDP version 3? And there's a lot of stuff, so we won't cover all of it, but we'll try and cover the most significant points. Next, we'll have a look at how to upgrade from version 2 into version 3. There are a couple of upgrade paths available to you. One that we recommend, 2 if you're keen, but we don't recommend it because it will leave a whole lot of old stuff lying around. But we'll talk about those options during the session. We'll also have a quick look at some of the potential concerns that service providers and publishers may have with this upgrade to version 3, and try and allay some of those issues in this webinar. Next, we'll have a look at IPv3 clustering. Version 2 clustering was never really supported by the AAF. AAF will now be supporting clustering with version 3 and providing support in that area. And finally, we'll finish out with the next generation AAF project and what it means to you guys out in the Federation, out in the field, the changes that are coming to the Federation that will make it a better Federation for all to use. So, why are we bothering doing IDP 3? The main reason is that there has been an announcement that IDP version 2 will be end-of-life over the next few months, with it being completely end-of-life by July 31 next year. They are progressively reducing the support for Shibboleth IDP version 2. So at the end of the year, all security bugs and non-security bugs will be addressed, but at the end of the year after that, they'll start to reduce that level of support. By the end of February, they'll stop addressing moderate security bugs. Then 31 of May, it'll be important security bugs will stop being addressed. And then up until 31st of June, they'll only do critical security bugs. So we need to move everybody out of IDP 3 before the middle of next year. So it gives us about 8 months to get there, probably a little less, but I think we should be able to get everybody over the line by then. So, what's new in IDP 3? They've basically rebuilt the whole of the software package from the ground up. and in doing so, made it a better product to use. The first thing they've done is included the attribute release consent component into the core part of Shibboleth 3. It's now built in. It's not a separate install, which will make things a whole lot easier. They've also brought in the terms of use component, which was part of the original UApprove, which came out of the Switch AAI group. That's also part of the base install. I don't believe too many IDPs are actually using the terms of use, but it's there if you want to use it for your people to click on the terms of use as they first authenticate. The next thing is some improved authentication systems as part of the core piece of software as of version 3.2, which is the one we're looking at. The Spinago or Kerberos single sign-on option is now part of the deployment. That gives you true single sign-on from the desktop right through to the web if you're running Active Directory or some Kerberos-based solution. ECP is also supported out of the box if the password auth option is used. If you don't use password auth, there's some extra configuration you can do to enable ECP, which we'll be doing with the IDP installer that the AF is providing. So ECP is something that stands for Extended Client or Proxy, and it's something that service providers have been asking for IDPs to provide for a while. By doing the IDP3 upgrade, we hope that all IDPs will be able to support ECP to then support these services and services for your researchers. Next, they've changed or added some additional storage options. There is a new client-side storage option available. And as of version 3.2, the HTML5 local storage version is now available. It allows for storage of larger chunks of information about the session. If you do choose to use a client-side storage, it will reduce the amount of configuration and effort in installing your IDP, because there will be a reduced need for a database underneath it, which will make clustering a little bit easier. It's still fairly experimental, the whole HTML5 storage thing, because the Shibboleth developers are still coming to terms with what it actually means and what they can do with it. So I'd expect to see more options available with the HTML5 storage as newer releases come out. It's there to support things like attribute consent and storing that information, and to help with the single logout functionality that's now been improved with Shibboleth version 3. The next thing that they've improved on is the ability to edit login and logout pages and content on the fly. There's no need to restart and reinstall or rebuild your web idp.war file with this version of Shibboleth. You can go and edit that stuff, and the changes will be seen immediately on your IDP.
I might add that this applies just to the Velocity templates, but that's the default option for the login page. So tweaking the login page is much easier when finalizing the deployment.
Yep, it'll make things a lot quicker for you to get that branding sorted out instead of having to redeploy and redeploy. Oops. The next improvement is more flexible configuration. They've basically reorganized the whole of the configuration setup within the IDP. There's a lot less XML. It's a different style of configuration. It allows for much more flexibility. It makes it easier to work with. I'm still actually working and developing my understanding of how it all fits together, but it does seem a lot easier than the previous bunch of XML configuration that was IDP version 2, and a real pain. They've also improved the upgrade process or update process, making it simpler to upgrade from version 3, versions 3.2, 3.1, 3.2.1, 3.2.2 and so forth. And we'll see that as we roll out newer versions of the IDP installer. So that will make our life at the AF easier to keep that piece of software up to date.
Yeah, my comment on this would be in version 3 they separated files that are to be edited by deployers from files that are part of the software distribution and should not be touched. And things that are supposed to be edited are primarily under the conf directory, and system things not to be touched are under system. And if you modify things there, it will get overwritten during an upgrade, but otherwise the configuration files that are to be touched by end users are preserved, and that's been working smoothly.
Mm-hmm. There's some improved administration features available with this version. There's a resolver tester, a reloading service, which are easily accessible from local hosts to do those tests and reload these services. And you can reload various components individually. It's easier to integrate with non-standard vendor requirements. Their plugin development is a whole lot simpler, making that piece easier. They've improved logout support. It's supposedly much better than the support that was provided with IDP 2.4, but the details are still very sketchy from the Shibboleth website, so I'm still trying to understand what that actually means. Have you had any experience with that, Vlad? The logout stuff yet, or is it still too new?
Well, it's the logout in 3.1 works about the same as 2.4, so doing a single SP, and the 3.2 is supposed to be go much deeper in the implementation and do a full logout, but that's been released just a few days ago, so haven't seen that yet.
So the AF will be investigating what that actually means with regards to single logout across the Federation. And if it is true single logout, then I would expect that we'll be deploying it and moving that out into the Federation to make it a much better logout solution for services. I know that a number of you have asked for that, that functionality previously. CAS support is now built in. The IDP can now act as a CAS IDP if you want to do that. It includes most of the CAS protocol version 2 options, and it also does the CAS logout stuff. So if you want to keep your CAS services but use your SHIB IDP to do both CAS and Shibboleth stuff, that's an option for you. The simplified clustering, Terracotta has long passed and gone. They've now got the memcache option for clustering built in and improved over version 2.4. And I'll be talking a bit more about that further on in the slides. It's easier for developers to write new features, and that's been a deliberate design decision by the Shibboleth guys to make it easier for that to add new features. Let's see. And there are many other new features that can be found on the Shibboleth release notes page. So if you want to see what else has been added to Shibboleth, that would be the place to go. The AF has also rewritten the shared token generator, or the plugin to generate the shared token attribute. We've actually removed the support for LDAP, so you can no longer write your shared token directly to your LDAP directory. If there is a requirement for that by people, please let us know. But at the moment, we're only supporting the ability to write it to a database instance. We decided that the LDAP was a bit too difficult to do.
I might add that independently from that, Doakiri has updated the old shared token module to work with IDP version 3. So, and we did preserve the LDAP option. So that is still available. I believe AUT, and Tim Jones is here, is using the shared token module talking to LDAP, so that's still doable with IDP version 3 with the code base we are maintaining.
Okay, so we have two options for that. Quick little demo for you, what it looks like to run up an IDP3. I actually built this one yesterday using the IDP installer that the AF has built that wraps around the IDP and installs all the components of the IDP, including Apache, Jetty, Tomcat, securing up the server, the whole kit and caboodle. It took about 5 minutes to build the IDP that way. So I'll use the attribute validator. This is just a simple tool that the AF built to validate the attributes that are sent over. We'll have a look for my IDP. It's an experimental thing. IDP 3 webinar demo. I'll select that one. It comes up with your standard login page. And my username. Password. It's got a couple of the standard options if I want it to remember or clear, and also to clear the permissions for the attribute release. So I'll have a look at what that looks like. And it didn't do the attribute release stuff. Sorry about that. I'll just go back and make that happen. Just start a new browser, I think. Sod. Hate doing demos. Let's kill that off altogether. Share. Browser. So attribute validator, log in, select my identity provider, click the clear button, and log in. This time it shows us the attribute release. They've got some more options at the bottom. It can ask me next time to log in, that if I want to send my information every time. It can ask me to send my information again if my information changes. So if my email address changes or some other detail changes, this screen will pop up again. Or there's the option of never ask me again, and I'll be happy with that. So I'll just go with the change option, records that information. This particular version records it in a database, but that could also be recorded by the browser if you want to go that way. And there we are with all the attributes apart from the affiliation. That's something that needs to be configured by you, the IDP administrators, because we don't see that there's a standard way that people are presenting that particular attribute in a directory. Just close that. The other little demo I'd like to share with you is some work that I've been doing with Bond University. I've been working with Bond to set up their IDP. I've done a test version so far. And what they have is both CAS and ADFS. They have their CAS IDP using ADFS to do their authentication. What we've done with the Shibboleth IDP is to sit that underneath CAS. So IDP, Shib IDP goes to CAS, goes to ADFS. And what that looks like. So we pick Bond University, select. I haven't got a certificate sorted, but get that done. And it takes us straight to their ADFS login page. Now we don't have a login there, that one doesn't work. But if I were to log in it would then send back the remote user, which then the IDP can use to gather up all the attributes and continue on with the normal shibboleth authentication. So what Bond have been trying to do is have everything sit underneath the ADFS, all their multiple authentication options, have one single login page for everything, and I think we're going to be able to achieve that with this particular rollout. So back to the demo, back to the slides. Show that. Yep. So upgrading your IDP. So some recommendations. We recommend that you don't do an in-place upgrade, that you actually create a new server for your IDP version 3, install that and migrate your configuration, whatever configuration and data across to your new IDP. We also recommend using a newer version of your operating system, Red Hat 7, CentOS 7, Oracle, the latest version of that if you have it available. We're also recommending that you use Java 8. Java 7 will work, but it's already end of life, so you're sort of going down a backwards street if you go that way. We're also recommending you move to Jetty 9.2 or 9.3. Tomcat's still an option, but Jetty is the one that is the recommended Java servlet engine for IDP by the Shibboleth developers, so make it easier for them to support. We also recommend that you don't use packaged versions of Jetty or Tomcat, but use an installed version from the web. The packaged versions tend to put stuff all over the place and make it difficult to manage. We also recommend that you keep your URLs the same, so you're effectively using the same configuration, same metadata, to minimize the changes that were required in metadata. We will be providing a set of documentation on how to do this upgrade, and we'll be recommending that you use a local machine and change your etc. host value when testing your new IDP. This will allow you to keep your old IDP running and operational for your current users while testing. When you're finished testing, all you need to do is change your DNS entry to point to the new IDP. The metadata should be fairly similar, so it should work with both the old and new. This then gives you a fast rollback position if required. So if you do find a bug or something after you've rolled it out, just changing the DNS back will put the old IDP back in play. That's how we've been doing a number of IDP installs.
Yeah, I would adhere that to keep the metadata the same, you would preserve the URLs and you would also preserve the certificates. So part of what the yet to be published documentation would say would be copy over the back channel certificates from the old server to the new one, so that they have the same identity on the SAML side, and to the service providers they look identical, so you can swap them around by changing the DNS entry to point either to the old one or to the new one.
Okay. And we also recommend that you use the AF IDP3 installer that we've built. It makes life a whole lot easier and quicker for upgrading, for installing the IDP, and also will make it easier for future upgrades as new versions of the various components come out. Attribute scripts will need to be updated if you're using version 8. Changing of the scripting engine has occurred between version 8 and version 7. If you're using version 7, your scripts will still work out of the box, but we still recommend using version 8. Slide disappeared. Cleaner use of native version 3 files. Some of the elements are just ignored, making configuration files confusing. A lot of the older stuff will be deprecated and methods moved or removed at any time. So it's a dangerous place to be. You can use new property replacement values for your configuration files, and user consent doesn't work with the legacy mode. So we recommend using the native version, version 3 files if possible. Only after you're thoroughly tested, replace your current IDP2 instance with the new IDP3 instance. We recommend that you test against the Federation test service providers. So we've got the attribute validator, which I've shown you. We've also got the ECP test tools. If we're going to install ECP, you should be testing that that component works as well. We also recommend that you do it first in your test environment. So if you have a test IDP, work through and upgrade that from version 2 to version 3. If you don't have one, then create one, clone your current production server and make it a new test server. We've actually just recently written some draft documentation on how to clone your IDP, your production back into a test environment to give you a starting point. The other things you should be doing once you've got your IDP ready to go out is to check it against SSL Labs, to check your Apache configuration and your security configuration. And if you have a testing environment or a scanning environment, run it up against that to make sure that you're covering all your bases. There are a number of upgrade methods available to you. The first one is a highly recommended one, and that's to use the AAF installer. There's a link to that at the end of the slides. It makes the initial build and setup of a working IDP extremely quick. It took me about 5 to 10 minutes yesterday to build that IDP that I just demonstrated. There will still be some work required to ensure that the native configuration files are set up to match your version 2 configurations, but that effort is well worth it in ensuring that you can move forward quickly. The other parts of the configuration you'll need to work through are the branding, applying Apache certificates, and any LDAP configuration tweaking. So if you're using LDAP over SSL or TLS, you'll need to do some tweaking there. Run your tests, run them against your local machine with the etc. hosts set appropriately. Once you're happy, go live. Try and get some real users to test it to make sure that they're happy with what it looks like and how it works. Option 2, this is not recommended, but you can do it if you want, and that's to let the Shibboleth installer upgrade your existing IDP configuration for you, and then do a conversion from the legacy stuff into the native stuff. This will enable legacy mode to utilize existing configuration files to get you up and running fast, but we only see this as a temporary move. Resolve a script changes are still likely if you're going to use Java 8. And we've got some convert relying party metadata providers, attribute resolves, etc. to native IDP files afterwards. So there's a bit of work to do even if you choose to use this option. The aim is to disable all of the legacy mode eventually and to be able to enable all of the full functionality of the new IDP3. Do your standard testing, and when you're ready, go live. There is an option 3 which isn't documented on the slides, but option 3 is have the AAF do it for you. So if you want us to come and do it for you, we'll work up a statement of work for you and negotiate a time and be able to come and work through you to upgrade your IDP. It'll take us, it's about 2 days worth of work in total, spread over a couple of weeks to ensure that we get the work done properly.
I think I can say for New Zealand, there would be an option to negotiate a similar statement of work with Swakeri. And Sat might clarify that later, but as in principle, it would be an option.
I'll come to that. Service provider concerns. there have been a couple of concerns identified. The IDP3 is just using the same SAML2 protocols as IDP2, so everything should just work. There's been no changes to any of the IDP or any of the service providers that I've been testing with. They've just worked perfectly straight out of the box, no change at all required. Service providers still using SAML1 should consider moving to SAML2. I don't know that we have too many SAML1 service providers in the AAF Federation, but this may be a concern when we move to Edugain, but that's really a service provider needs to deal with that. Service providers using outdated software that only support insecure encryption algorithms should be upgraded. I believe all the service providers in the AF have been upgraded to a suitable version that support the new certificates. That would have been highlighted when we updated the DS change several months ago to its certificate. And service providers must ensure they fail gracefully if attributes are not present. That shouldn't really be an issue within the AF because we have our core attributes and IDPs generally provide all of those attributes. This is more an issue for service providers are going to connect to international IDPs, which may be an issue when we do move into Edugain in the new year. But in general, there shouldn't really be any concerns for service providers with the introduction of IDP3. Vlad will talk about one issue shortly, which is a minor concern about the persistent ID, which he will talk about now. So I'll hand over to Vlad to talk through this slide.
Yes, thanks. Now, there are two different ways to express the persistent ID of a user. For long term, there had been a requirement for an attribute that is targeted to each service provider, so that the user can have a pseudonymous identifier that identifies the user but can't be correlated across services. And historically, partly as a misunderstanding of the specification, it had been expressed as an attribute called represent targeted ID, while it really should have been expressed as a name ID used in a different place in the SAML protocol as an identifier of the user at the SAML envelope, not just as an attribute payload. But the long-term practice had been expressing it as a represent targeted ID attribute. And this is deprecated in IDP version 3. It still can be configured, but it's not in the configuration templates. And if you dig deep enough to find it, you get the warning that it's deprecated. So we should switch to persistent, to expressing it as a name ID in the SAML envelope as a persistent name ID. On the service provider side, this should work smoothly. The default configuration for HWF SP would just consume either of these attributes, and if it receives just one of them, it would be seen the same. If it receives both of them, it would concatenate them as a double value and would mess things up. And what we want as a smooth upgrade is just switch to the persistent name ID in a way that the users don't just notice and they keep the same identity at the service providers. The good practice of running managing this attribute at the IDP is storing it in a database, where for a triplet identifying the IDP, the service provider, and the user, the IDP stores the hash value generated. And in that case, when we switch to the persistent name ID in IDP version 3, it would just work smooth, pick up the value from the database and use it, and the user would keep the identity. There is also an option to just compute it on the fly, and I think in New Zealand that could be the majority of the deployments. And And the generator that generates the hash value would generate a different one if started on the IDP version 3 with persistent name ID. What we should do for those IDPs that are running version 2 without a database is switch to using a database while preparing the version 3 upgrade. And any user that hits the IDP and accesses the service would get the values stored in the database. And when we switch to IDP version 3, the persistent name ID generator in version 3 would pick the value up from the database and see, yes, the identity for this user to use at this service is this. I have it in the database. I won't be generating a different one, and users would keep the identity. So the bottom line is to make it smooth for the users. If you are using the generating value on the fly, start storing it in the database now, so that when you actually do the upgrade to version 3, all users that use the IDP have their identity stored in the database, and they don't hit any glitches when visiting the service and suddenly being seen as a different user.
Okay, thanks, Vlad. The majority of AAF IDPs already use a database. I don't know that we have identified any. I think there may be one that we've worked with.
Yes.
So that should not be a real issue. It just means you need to migrate that data from the IDP 2.4 to your new IDP, and that'll all be documented as part of the upgrade process that we're working through at the moment. Next on to clustering. Clustering provides lots of good benefits, no single point of failure, upgrading one node without affecting resources or access to resources for your users, so continuity, and better resource utilization. As I mentioned earlier, the use of Terracotta, the old clustering software, has been well and truly gone or deprecated for some time. They're now fully supporting Memcache, which is now built into IDP version 3. Cookies are now the default session storage, as well as the HTML5 storage for active-active setup, and it just works between SAML2 deployments. If you're doing a full, highly available IDP, you also need to consider clustering the database underneath it that supports the IDP. If you're using server-based storage, making sure you have a highly available load balancer or application switch that sits in front of it, and making sure you have a highly available directory service or LDAP service, Active Directory, sitting behind it that it can sort of move between if there are issues with that Active Directory. So all components need to be highly available to give you a fully highly available IDP solution. What clustering will mean is two options. You can do it without Memcache. If you do it that way, when the user logs in to IDP1, if IDP1 fails, the user will be redirected to IDP2, but they will need to log in again. If you have the Memcache option configured, when a user logs in to either IDP1 or 2, if either of those fails, they'll be redirected to the other IDP through your load balancer, but the user will not need to re-log in again. That will just be completely seamless to move from one IDP to another, because the IDP2 is aware of the session that was created in IDP1 because of Memcache. We will, in the AAF, be providing greater support for clustering, and one of the solutions that we're developing as part of our project will actually be deploying many clustered versions of IDPs for people as a software as a service identity provider in the future. So we'll need to understand how that works, and once we understand it, we'll be able to support you guys in running your clustered IDPs. I also hope to have the IDP installer be able to generate a configuration for multiple IDPs in a cluster in the future as well. That brings us to the next generation AAF project. This has been funded by the government. and comprises of 3 main activities. The first activity is around understanding the government requirements for AF participation. Some time ago at one of the AF roadshows, we had a discussion with the BOM, Bureau of Meteorology, and they said, great, love the AF, the only problem is that you need to meet the ASD requirements, to which we had no idea what they were. That situation is now changing, and the project is underway to make sure that the AF is compliant with regards to those ASD requirements. The first part of that is to move our infrastructure into a compliant infrastructure vendor. Most of that has been completed to date. There are still some parts of that which are to move to a compliant vendor, but that should be completed early in the new year. There is still some work and understanding of the other requirements of ASD, and the project will work through those over the next 12 months. The aim is to be compliant to enable us to have government resources, data sets and the like be available to participants within the AF. The second part of the project is the software extensions, and there are a number of extensions that we're working on. The most significant is the new Discovery service, which you will be able to see live in our test environment next Wednesday. We believe that's going live. It provides a number of features that will enable the future of the AF. This includes the ability to provide identity providers from Edugain, the Federation of Federations, to display all identity providers in Edugain. And there are many thousands of them. So being able to provide and sort through and find your IDP across the nation, the global set of IDPs, is one of the functions that this thing will provide. To do that, it provides a searching mechanism that's easier to use than the current IDP. Provides much cleaner user interface. There is a geolocation option, so it will try and find the IDPs that are physically closer to your physical location and present them higher up the list. It will remember the previous IDP that you visited or used to log in and put that at the top of the list as well, so you can easily find that IDP. We're also including service provider and identity provider logos if they're available and have been made available to the Federation on the page to make it visibly easier to find your IDP based on their logo rather than their name. And we're also providing additional support for ECP based services. And what this means is that there will be an API provided by the Discovery service that will allow ECP-enabled services to be informed of which IDPs are enabled with ECP and only present those ECP-enabled IDPs for users to select when they log in, or to know that they can log in via those ECP-enabled IDPs. The next part of the software extensions is improving our Federation utilisation statistics. The current utilisation statistics are gathered up from our Discovery service, and that doesn't capture all of the information about all of the services in the Federation. One of the most notable ones is AARNet's Cloud Store. Because they run their own Discovery service, we have no information on what utilisation of the Federation that they are actually getting. With this, oops, sorry, there. With our current, as I said, the current mechanism is flawed and it doesn't capture all of the utilisation information. We will be coming to IDPs and asking them to provide their IDP logs there are some additional mechanisms within IDP3 that makes it easier for us to push those logs across the web in both mechanism and ensuring that the logs are anonymatized. So we have that privacy of those logs is maintained by collecting them centrally. Once we have those centralized logs, we'll be able to provide much more detailed information about what utilization of services is being made across the Federation, and much more accurate information about those that utilization. Finally, we'll be rolling out a non-web service option as part of the Trust Fabric. It's most likely will be a Radius server that will be deployed. We're looking to outsource the deployment of, or the creation of this Radius server. It may end up being EduRoam as part of that. So we'll be talking with AARNet as that as an option, but it may be a completely separate Radius piece of infrastructure. It's still up in the air, and the project will work through that. The aim of providing a Radius server together with the Shibboleth IDP is to start to look at how to provide access to non-web-based or SSH type services, high-performance compute and the like. So that's just one step in moving down that path to provide that additional infrastructure, to provide that additional authentication for those types of services. The final activity of the next generation project is the Software as a Service Identity Provider, or the IDP in a cloud. So if you're fed up running your own IDP, then come and talk to us, and we'll, in probably 12 months' time, be able to run an IDP for you in the cloud. It will be a clustered IDP, so we'll have to be fully aware of how clustering works for the this IDP, and it will provide a secure tunnel back to your home LDAP or Active Directory server for authentication. Or if you're a small organization and don't have your own Active Directory or LDAP authentication, we will have an option that will run a complete identity solution for you in the cloud, providing both an IDP and an LDAP directory, which you can then populate with your users. So, questions and answers. Have we got any questions?
Yeah, we got a question from Stephen about the share token.
Okay. Stephen, does this mean I can't pass through a pre-generated token which I have stored in LDAP? No, that's not the case. The removal of the LDAP option from the plugin is that the plugin was able to previously populate your LDAP directory with a shared token that was generated by the IDP. If you're pre-generating your shared tokens into your LDAP, that's fine. The configuration just needs to be changed to consume it from your LDAP directory rather than through the plugin. So you won't have any need for the plugin at all. Okay, he's got that. Any other?
I have one question that was addressed to me from L. Shepard. So I use your specific question about whether we would be using the AF installer. My take on it is we would recommend to use it. There might be some tweaks to adapt it to the new environment, but the technical side is pretty much identical. So there might be some tweaks and branding references because the federation is called Tuakira.aaf, but we would be recommending the installer, and we would also accommodate needs for other options and provide advice and guidance on that.
Okay. Is there any further questions? Okay. Here are some references for you. We've got the IDP version 3 installer. Tuakira has their guide to installing the Shibboleth IDP if you want to do it by hand. There's the Shibboleth guides for upgrading from V2, and there's also the complete Shibboleth guide for the IDP3. It's a lot of reading there if you want to get into it. And there's also a link to our next generation AF project overview stuff available.
I see we are getting more questions. Tim Jones is asking about ADFS3 and IDP3. I might answer part of it where we got asked about using ADFS alone, and I wouldn't go that route. For example, it has no consent module, and for Edugain, it would be crucial to have consent on attribute release. ADFS alone has no ECP support, so once we get services that require ECP, it wouldn't work. So I certainly recommend putting still an IDP version 3 in front of ADFS. For the direct interaction, given that it would be talking to ADFS over LDAP, not over SAML, I don't think there would be any strict differences. The LDAP integration is almost unchanged. When doing the upgrade from version 2 to version 3, you can actually take your attribute release file as is. You might have to do some tweaks if the Java version changes. For Java 8, for the scriptlets you have in the attribute resolver configuration, you may have to do some syntactic changes, drop the code that creates the attribute object. But otherwise, the part for talking to LDAP it didn't change much. The newly generated configuration files would be relying on properties defined in one place and then reused in all other locations. So updating your LDAP server configuration is easier, but if you just want to reuse the attribute definitions you already have in your version 2 config, this would be just copy the files over, and the talking to ADFS shouldn't be any different.
Thanks, Vlad. There's also, just on the ADFS and Shibboleth IDP, the UK Federation have developed a bridge that allows you to log into one and that will log you into the other automatically. It doesn't seem to matter which one you log into first, it will log you into the other one at the same time. I'm still trying to get some more information on that bridge and what it actually means and if it's available for use by folk in our federations. As I get that information, I'll make it available to everyone on this list and further. But at the moment, still just I've seen it and it does exist, but I'm not sure exactly what's involved in setting it up. We have another question. Does the installer migrate the current database with values to new versions? That will be documented. There will be a documented process that will tell you how to export your current database information and import it into your new IDP. So there will be a migration process defined. So
I might add a little bit to that, where the IDP version 3 can store number of different things in the database, and some of it can be stored either in database or in encrypted cookies on the client side, like the information on consent. And just because the structure of how consent is managed completely changed, if you have been running UApprove with version 2, I think you will just lose all of that information and users will have to click the I agree button again. And the useful information to copy over would be the shared token values and the persistent ID values. Or okay. Terry, you would be taking this approach? That the migration would cover just the shared token values and targeted ID values, and other things like consent would just get dropped?
I still have to investigate it further, but if that's the case, then that will be the case. I haven't done a full comparison of the databases yet, but next question again from Lalitha. How does the clustering work when CAS sits in front of an IDP when it comes to memcache, etc.? I'm sorry, I'm going to have to take that one offline with you, Lalitha. I haven't really got that far into understanding how all the clustering stuff works, but once we start to unpick it, we'll make that information available to you guys. Okay. So from Benji, in V3, could you simply present eduperson target ID as a value derived from mirroring the persistent name ID? Mirroring as a persistent.
I'll try answering that. It's like if the question. Okay. As of 3.1.1, which was the latest I looked at, the compute ID and stored ID connectors were still there, marked as deprecated. So if you want to do the legacy representation, you can just continue doing it, and it will work until Scott Cantor decides to remove the connector from the code base in a subsequent release, and I don't know when that would be. I think so far it's a gentle push towards start using persistent name ID, but it would still be feasible. It's there. It can be configured that way. It's just the proper way would be persistent name ID. And now that we are redeploying everything, it's a good time to clean up the configuration.
I've also done a review within the Australian Access Federation of all of the service providers that actually use eduperson target ID and persistent ID together, because those are the ones that will potentially have issues because the two values will be presented as multiple values in the attribute. There are only 10 that I've identified, so we need to target those 10 to get them to reconfigure. But as I said, I'd like to start to move towards using the named ID rather than the eduperson target ID to send that over. Does the installer look after customizations done in Attribute Resolver, e.g. custom attributes? The installer creates a copy of all of the important files that you'd be editing, such as the Attribute Resolver, and pushes that into the IDP's configuration. So you make a change on the resolver, on the version that we make available to you to edit, you rerun the installer, and that will move that across. It will maintain those customizations over different runs of the installer. It's been designed that way so you can have custom stuff as well as the base stuff that we provide out of the box.
Okay, I see I misinterpreted Benji's question, and he's reiterating as to use the generated values for persistent name ID, but also represent it as eduperson targeted ID. There's just one entry in the database for the targeted ID. So it depends on whether it gets generated by one generator or the other, then it's in the database and the other generator would use it. But if the persistent name ID generator kicks in, I believe it would then put it into the SAML envelope. If you also use the eduperson targeted ID, it should pick up the value from the database. But if you also release it as an attribute, then the service provider would be receiving it twice, and bad things would happen. The application would see it as a long value, which is a concatenation of the two values, and things would break. Applications generally don't handle so well receiving multiple values for an attribute that they expect to be single valued.
We generally promote packaged Tomcat because of packaging purposes. What exactly the real issue going with packaging Tomcat, or with the packaged Tomcat? The packaged version of Tomcat puts stuff all over the place. It tends to be several steps behind the current version that's out there from the actual developers of Tomcat. And we're also moving away from using Tomcat to Jetty. So it's just recommended by the Shibboleth guys to stay away from the packaged versions of those particular products. With the IDP installer, we'll be ensuring that those packages, as well as the IDP software itself, is at the most recent version and all the appropriate patching has been done. So we're trying to take that issue away of using the packaged versions by providing the most recent versions available within our IDP installer and upgrading those as well as the IDP when new versions come out. Yeah, well, as a support desk, we'll still support Tomcat as an option. If you want to run it yourself, that's fine. We've gone 5 minutes over, so if you have any further questions, happy to take them offline. For Australian folk, you can send your questions to support@aaf.edu.au. Vlad, where can New Zealanders send their questions?
And Tuakere questions to support@tuakere.ac.nz.
Just a quick bit of advertising. In the new year, we have to run many more webinars. Hopefully this webinar has been of use to you. So keep your eyes out for future invitations for these webinars, and I'm happy to have the New Zealanders join us in future webinars again. And if the New Zealanders want to provide a webinar, that would be fine too. Finally, feedback on both the webinar, the installer, and any other AAF packages or tools. We're quite happy to accept that. If you have any comments or feedback, then please send them through to support as well. We are always trying to keep this software and the tools and the Federation as fresh, and any ideas that you people have out there that you can provide us to help us keep it moving forward are much appreciated. So thank you for your time today in listening to both Vlad and I, and also thanks Vlad for helping out in the presentation.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for organizing this.
Okay. So copies of the webinar and the slide packs to all the participants over the next few days. Thanks for joining us.